This segment talks about the so-called causeway binding. In 1909, the bookseller Southern in London, still in business, remaindered a book about the English miniature painter named Causeway. And when someone remainders a book, in my understanding, it means we've got extra copies and we want to move them. And somebody at the Southern firm got the idea that wouldn't it be clever and maybe commercially advantageous to take copies of this book on this miniature guy, Causeway, and do a painting on, let's say, ivory, and inset that painting into the cover of the book, particularly since it would be appropriate for the content. Causeway being a miniature painter, the binding having a miniature in it. Like this. And this was well received. And afterwards, books were decorated in similar fashion, sometimes inside the front cover, sometimes on the front cover, sometimes both. And books that were decorated in that way were called Causeway bindings, even though they had nothing to do with Causeway the miniature, who started the whole fad. Here is a beautiful book by C.S. Forester, a name that you'll recognize from another context, about Josephine, Napoleon's wife. Fell in love with her and married her, even though, and this is shocking for the time, she was 6 years older than he was. It's a lovely portrait. She's got jewels on, looks like an empress. She'd love to have a book like this with all the inlays on it. But there's a certain sadness in her eyes. And it's a painting that's very well done. Although it's not what we would say a legitimate Causeway binding, it certainly is a Causeway style binding. And there's absolutely no reason at all, absolutely no reason at all why you should not buy it. It just says, "Buy me, I'm beautiful, and I have a Causeway binding." Or a Causeway portrait. This one is similar, and there's a portrait of Dickens inside the front cover with pearls around the portrait on a nice Morocco doublure, and this is distinctive in that it's a Causeway binding on an important book. A lot of Causeway bindings, just like a lot of four-edge paintings, were done for books that weren't moving, that needed some push to get them into people's libraries. But this is the first edition of Pickwick Papers, one of the great novels or great books of 19th century English literature. It's Dickens's funniest book, and it's a very nice copy that has a special bonus in that it's in a lovely red Morocco binding with inlays and a lovely painting of Dickens. We don't know who did it, but it certainly is very high quality in terms of expressiveness and verisimilitude. The two examples we've just looked at are Causeway style bindings. This is the real thing. This is a Causeway binding without a hyphen for the style to come after it. And what makes this the real thing is that it involves the four players who started the whole thing. Southern, the bookseller, Stonehouse, who was the designer of the portraits and the bindings, a woman named C.B. Curry, who was the artist who did the portrait, and then Riviere, the guys who actually produced the binding, actually executed the binding. And we know that Miss Curry is involved because on the paste down inside front cover, it says so. And later on, there's a registration page that says the same thing, that this is number 891 of the Causeway bindings invented by J.H. Stonehouse with miniatures on ivory by Miss Curry. And it's signed by Stonehouse and Curry. So this is like, it's a registered, pedigreed Causeway binding. The book is interesting. It's Shelley's Adonais. It's his eulogy of Keats. And not surprisingly, it has a picture, a portrait on ivory of Shelley on the front cover and of Keats on the back cover. And these are portraits that are beautifully done. The brush work is deft and delicate. The emotions in the faces are clear and appropriate. And it's a book that would be wonderful to own. It's a facsimile of the first printing of 1821 that was done in Pisa, which is rare and extraordinarily expensive. But this has the added advantage, even if it's not the first printing, of being a genuine Causeway binding. And it even says so along the four edges of the boards, even if you've missed the two other testimonials. There are Causeway bindings, or Causeway style bindings, and then there are Causeway bindings, or Causeway style bindings. This is, I would think, the most visually impressive available Causeway style binding. I'm sure that somewhere in some private collection or institution there's something as grand, at least as grand, but this is the kind of impressiveness that you're not going to see on the market anytime soon. It's Longfellow's Evangeline. It's a book printed on vellum and illuminated by hand on every page. But most important, it got 14 oval portraits. Longfellow in the middle, and then scenes from the narrative, scenes from the story. It's a very large book, and that's why there's room for these miniatures. They are all done with great skill. There's a man named Stephen Ratcliffe, whose special interest is Causeway and Causeway bindings, and he, to my knowledge, knows more about them than anyone else. The book is not signed by Curry like this one is, but I asked him who he thought was the artist, and he said that he had no doubt at all that these are Curry portraits. The book comes from the collection of Phoebe Boyle, sold in 1923 in New York. Big sale, amazing material. She collected fine bindings, vellum printings. And as I was mentioning in another segment on the Guild of Women Binders, Phoebe Boyle is like Estelle Doheny in a series of half a dozen eminent women collectors, Edith Rockefeller McCormick with Dove's bindings, and a number of others. And anything that comes from the Phoebe Boyle collection has a kind of distinctive appeal apart from the book itself. But this doesn't really need anything special beyond one's visual appreciation. The outside is more special probably than the inside, but it's a beautifully printed and beautifully illuminated book as well. One of 26 copies, printed 1903, and a book that would be a featured item in anybody's collection.